Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough. Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. And Raised by These Wolves 2, Child Trafficking Through Foster Care and Court Systems, which will be coming out mid-July. Please feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I'm so happy to have my return guest on, Attorney Christine Miller. She was last on season 5, episode 121, and that date was June 13th of 2024. Where we had talked about judicial immunity and judicial delegation, which was a huge problem. And today we're going to talk about the Chevron Deference and how crazy family court is in regards to Britney Spears, Catherine Katzenhoff, and Maya, who had gone through CPS, that whole case, and this guardian ad litem who collected $200,000 and a trip to Hawaii through, was reported by Colorado Reporting. Apparently they do get trips to Hawaii. So I totally welcome you, Attorney Christine Miller. Thank you for coming on Slam the Gavel podcast. So let's get at it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back. And I'm so excited to be here.
I am very happy to have you back on. You're a wealth of knowledge.
Well, thank you.
So what is this? Everyone's excited about the Chevron Deference. They think it's going to help with their CPS cases.
So I am not as optimistic about the Chevron or the overturning of Chevron. I have gotten a significant amount of DMs and messages, but essentially the overturning of Chevron, it only applies to federal agencies for now. And I understand that that will likely trickle down and there'll be arguments that it should apply to state agencies, AKA CPS. That being said, it really just gets rid of the rule that gives the agency deference if the statute is unambiguous. And I do think that it will be helpful in some scenarios, but that being said, I do not think this is going to save the day by any means. I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding and lack of understanding of what happens in family court, how overreaching it is. For example, in divorces and custody actions, oftentimes you will not have a state agency, right? It's just the judge making a decision. So the overturning of Chevron will have no application to that in any capacity if it's adopted by the state.
Well, that's very disappointing.
Yes, and I do, I am optimistic that there are going to be so many, that there is such a growing concern for family court that there will be so many more lawsuits in federal court and that the federal court will take note of it. And maybe this is the beginning of just bringing awareness that just because an agency says something or does something, it's not automatically the quote unquote right thing to do or the equitable thing to do. So maybe this is the beginning, but as far as being life changing, I don't see it for right now.
Well, people had their hopes up about that as I was watching social media.
Absolutely. I got so many questions. And again, it only applies at this point to federal agencies. And so the reality is in state family court, odds are you're not dealing with a federal agency. I mean, on another note, we can talk about the fact that federal funding for family court is extraordinarily problematic. I agree that Title IV funding of federal court entices and increases litigation, especially in certain areas and in certain states.
Right.
If you follow Susan Bassey, it is truly shocking to me how much some of these, I think they call them minors counsel in California. We call them GALs or FOCs in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. But the fact that they are getting federal funding to pay for some of these attorneys for children, that is extraordinarily problematic. Now, right now in public cases or private cases, as far as divorces and custody actions in the Commonwealth, those are being paid for by the litigants, by the parties. Which is also a problem. But if you add federal funding into that, I can imagine that there will be a wait list of attorneys that would like to be GALs or FOCs.
Right, because the Title 4D, which is the child support enforcement, this really gets people wanting to litigate. This increases the litigation 100%.
Well, just hypothetically speaking, if the federal government is going to match funds that you spend, right? So if you have any sort of agency or program. And if you spend $100, the federal government's going to give you $100, you're going to spend more and grow. I mean, that just goes without saying. And it leads to the potential that the money is not being used in appropriate ways, or that you're growing and you're gaining too much power. I mean, again, this is not a new concept that money is an incentive for corruption or bad behavior. I mean, it's the tale as old as time. But I do not believe that most people, that even most attorneys that are practicing in family court, have an understanding of Title IV funding. And I'll be brutally honest, I was unaware of how much money went into some of these programs, and how much money the federal government matches for like adoptions, or how much money that the state can get in some of these adoptions. I mean, it's truly shocking to me. And I practiced in family court for 10 years, or, 8.5, 9.
Yeah, it's very just the fighting over the child support. If you take that away, you wonder how much that litigation would decrease. How much do these parents really love those kids? You know, I hate to say it, but when the money is taken away, really, how many parents have an interest in their own child?
It's something that we need to have a conversation about. And the reality is, so Matt Bevin is our former governor. And Kentucky was the first state to pass a law, a 50-50 parenting law, where there was a presumption that it was in the child or children's best interest to have an equal parenting schedule. Now, the reality is that was pretty much already the standard, in my experience, in Louisville, in the event that the parents were good and cared about the kids. And in my opinion, I believe an equal parenting schedule is ideal if everybody's getting along, but it gets nuanced when you're talking about counting overnights for the purposes of child support, and all of that stuff. So, but back to the Matt Bevin, he recently was in court, and the court actually sealed his divorce, which to me was very problematic. He's a public figure. There were some allegations against him. Now, a local newspaper did file to have the case unsealed, and the judge did recently unseal it. But I do think that this rebuttable presumption of equal parenting is problematic, because, like you said, with child support, you get an equal parenting schedule, the child support obligation goes down significantly. And I absolutely think that people have a monetary interest. I mean, obviously, like we just said, money controls a lot of the decision making, and money can be an incentive to do things in a way that's, corrupt or not ideal or not in the best interest.
Right, because some of these, when a spouse remarries, that usually is a trigger that starts all the litigation. And I've noticed that with other parents I've talked to, fathers and mothers, that when they remarry, then everyone starts messing around with this child support, which is what mine did. So he cut off the child support thinking my new husband was going to carry the ball and support kids that aren't even his. And that's not going to happen. So of course you run out and get an attorney because you're naive, and you go to court, and then all this whole mess starts, and parents don't realize, maybe you should just let them go and not pay the child support, and just, I don't know. I mean, maybe let the kids know that, the child support's gone. They already know about child support, these kids. These kids know your case better than you.
Which is in and of itself, though, a problem to me.
Yes.
I do not think as adults we are supposed to put adult problems on children.
Correct.
But I do wonder if all of these appointments of GALs, FOCs, minors counsel, therapy, play therapy, all of these things, the children are aware of the divorce in a very different manner. And obviously the kids are going to be aware that you're getting a divorce. But I do think we are involving kids, and I have seen so many children that are just aware of the ins and outs of their parents' divorce, which in my opinion is completely inappropriate. But to go back as far as like the filing of modification of child support, I will agree with you 100%. That a case may be quiet after a divorce, and then that motion gets filed and everything percolates, everything starts going. And I always think that there are life events, especially if you're dealing with someone that likes to maintain control. So someone gets remarried, someone gets a job change where they make significantly more money. The ex-spouse or the other parent decides, well, this isn't fair, so let's start litigating. litigating it. And the reality is life isn't fair. I absolutely have advised clients, not, if you file this, you're going to open the floodgates. Is a couple $100 a month worth it? It may be, it may not be, but for your peace of mind and for paying an attorney, you're never, one of the difficult things about being a divorce attorney is I have literally never had someone call me and say, "Oh my God, Christine, that was the best divorce ever. Thank you."
Yeah.
Right? Because divorce is terrible. There is no possibility when you take one household that you are going to have more money by dividing it. You're going to see your children less, regardless of the outcome, unless the other parent gets zero parenting time, which is very, very rare. And so divorce is a really traumatic, terrible experience. But that being said, I think family court and some divorce attorneys are really exacerbating the fact that it's so negative. I think there's a fundamental difference in criminal court, family court, criminal attorneys, and family law attorneys. And I think that, we have to look at the difference. Like, for example, I practiced criminal defense for 4 years. Now, can you imagine me going public and saying, "Marianne, I had never, in my whole career, I never once defended someone that was guilty of a crime." You would straight up laugh at me. I mean, it's just an insane notion. And I recently saw a influencer or a divorce attorney on TikTok talking about, the abuse situations, but she said that she had never represented an abuser. And she'd been a family law attorney for over a decade. Now, statistically speaking, that's impossible. I'm not saying that people that do things that aren't appropriate don't deserve attorneys, because certainly they do. I mean, this is the United States of America. But I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding from divorce attorneys sometimes, especially divorce attorneys that have never practiced a different area of law. They take everything their client says as absolute fact, and they can't look at it objectively and reasonably tell their client this is reasonable, or sort of navigate the situation. And what I mean by that is, so I would have clients in family court that would say, "I'm going to do this." And I would say, "Absolutely not. That's a terrible idea. If you want to talk to your child about the fact that mom had an affair, I'm not going to be your lawyer anymore. That's inappropriate, yada, yada." But I think that there are attorneys that don't do that. I know there are attorneys that don't do that, and they do it on a much larger scale. But that being said, there's also a fundamental difference in how criminal court and family court is handled from the judges. For example, family court always thinks that there's just going to be a resolution, and they'll be mad that a person has filed a motion. So when I was if I filed a motion to suppress in a very serious criminal matter, like felony, or if I filed a motion for a bond reduction in a very serious charge, the judge isn't going to be like, "Oh my gosh, Miss Miller, I cannot believe you filed it. How dare you file it? Are you insane?" The judge is going to come on the bench. They're going to hear my motion. They're going to let the prosecution go. They're going to issue a ruling from the bench, or they're going to issue a ruling within a week or two. But in family court, there's this diatribe of like 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes longer, where the court's kind of trying to get an agreement or like pressure one side. And I've seen judges force you to go out in the hallway and try to make a deal. And it's like, just hear the case, hear the facts, and make a decision,
Oh yeah, they don't. And that's what the whole issue going back to family court was, that I noticed, I hear from a lot of people and even myself, was the judge sat back and said, "Well, you two figure out a visitation schedule." I'm going, he does not. I mean, because we had co-parented pretty good for like almost 10 years. But then this judge is saying, "Figure out a visitation schedule." It just wouldn't work. He would not, very oppositional, defiant, would not work with you.
Absolutely. And judges need to understand, especially if there are lawyers involved, the fact that there isn't a resolution means we can't come to one, right? So you need to have a hearing. Like, you would never call the prosecutor up and be like, "Hey, prosecutor, will you agree to suppress this blood sample that was, I think was taken from unconstitutional means, and let's negotiate that." Like, that's a silly, silly thing to even, I don't even know what a prosecutor would do if you made that phone call, right? It's a radical thing. And so if you're in court, that's because you can't come to a decision. So the judge just needs to objectively hear the facts and make it your ruling. And I think people would learn very quickly that you're much better off to try to resolve this in your own volition, just because there's no possible way that a judge can know everything about your life. And what I mean by that is, what if you take a Pilates class with your girlfriends every Tuesday and you want to not have parenting time on that Tuesday? You know what I mean? So make a decision, like trade this, or, if the husband has something this week, you want to be able to work with your spouse. But if they won't work with you, that is why family court is there, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
almost as though these judges are furious and, quite frankly, pissed that they have to do the job that they were elected to do.
Well, if that's the case, then just abolish family court and take it back down to civil, where parents can have a jury of 6.
So, I was not on that wagon for quite a bit of time. I was interested in the conversation. But that being said, after being in family court and hearing everything that I've heard for so long, I really do think we need to either have the option to have jury trials in some circumstances in family court, because that's a check and balance, right?
Right.
Or we need to go back to where it was in civil. I will tell you, I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I think Louisville is the 16th or 17th largest city in the country. The things I have seen in Louisville, Kentucky, I didn't even see when I was a public defender in Eastern Kentucky, which should terrify people. I think we have 36 judges here, 10 family court judges. And I do think the fact that there are so many judges, that allows them to not really have accountability, right? And let me tell you something about judges. I'm going to go off on a little diatribe right here.
Okay.
Judges protect other judges at all cost, in a way that will make the back the blue, the police officer movement, where cops protect other cops, it will make that look like disloyalty. Judges will protect other judges at all cost, which to me is, we are a self-policing profession by nature. Judges are the highest bar in our profession. They hold your life, your children's life, your liberty, your property rights, everything that we hold to be, of the utmost importance by the Constitution. They hold that in their hands, yet they do not hold other members of the judiciary accountable when they are misbehaving. And that, to me, is probably the fundamental problem within the judiciary right now. As you know, I'm a huge proponent that judges are the new cops. There's been a mass awakening, and I love a lot of police officers. I'm friends with a lot of police officers, but we all know what happened in 2020 and what had been going on in this country for, since the beginning of law enforcement. But what's going on in the judiciary is more serious, and there is less of a lack of accountability, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, when a judge retires or one dies, I know of a president judge, he says the same speech over each one. Like, oh, he was always a judge we could go to with our, issues, and oh, she was always a judge we can go to with our issues, even though she's retiring early for certain reasons that we won't bring up. So
Well, you look at, like, here in Louisville, how this all started with me, and I know you're familiar with the TikTok judge that has a beauty content creation, and she selfie recorded a DV hearing, which was the straw that broke the camel's back for me in so many ways. But she just recently posted something on her judge Instagram that was the family court judges like embracing, and it was work family. You have to think about how that looks. Like, one, what would you do for your family to protect your family? And it's different than what you would do for other people. And certainly that is, so let's just say you're in Louisville and you decide, hey, I need to file a motion to recuse because this judge did something that, qualifies for recusal. Well, all you're doing is going back into the pool of this quote unquote work family. It looks a certain kind of way. It feels like an appearance of a conflict to me. It's not something I would be comfortable with. I don't know why the judge feels this desire to just promote that we are a work family. We are the strongest. Nothing can touch us. It's very inappropriate. And the bigger picture is clearly there's something about her that she has an inability, right, to not post everything on social media. Clearly, we've seen
Right.
that. She's doing makeup, she's washing her face. I mean, she posts her, everything that in anything that people normally wouldn't post, she posts. But you have 9 other judges that participate in these TikToks. That's the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you have to really think, what is it that we're doing? Because
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to some of the judges in that 9 that don't agree with the way she utilizes social media, but yet they have dancing TikToks,
Mm-hmm.
work family, like they are in charge of other families. They're in charge of whether or not you see your children or child. They can make a decision about your life, and then your family is torn apart. You're not seeing your child. And she's on a public social media embracing her colleagues, talking about how she has not only her family, but a work family.
Ugh.
How condescending and maniacal is that?
Yeah, I always thought, here you are destroying everybody's families, but you get to go home to your cozy home and your family.
Oh, and imagine a scenario in which something happened where they weren't able to see their child for, a month because of continuances or because of, you know what I mean? It would be a very different scenario.
Right.
And that kind of like pivots into the conversation about how people don't realize how crazy making family court is.
Oh,
I
yes.
still have not found the way to appropriately articulate how, I'm trying to think of the right word, how insane it can actually make you. If you take away someone's child, that
Hmm.
in and of itself is traumatic beyond. But if you take away someone's child and the person who lost the child truly believes in their heart of hearts that the other parent is abusing the child, think about
Hmm.
how crazy that will make you. And then you're waiting for a hearing. And so you wait 2 months for a hearing, and then you get there and the judge says, I'm going to hear 15 minutes of it, appoint a specialist, and we'll come back in 90 days. And you go back in 90 days and that report is still not ready, and so it gets passed again. So at this point, you've gone months believing that your child is in the care of an abusive person.
Hmm.
How does that make you think rationally, right?
Right. Right. I mean, people have lost their concentration. They've gotten CPTSD over this. They've gotten autoimmune diseases, heart attacks. And this is why family court is just so disgusting. It causes people to get very, very sick on top of the kids with their ACEs scores that are extremely high. And it's that adverse childhood experiences scores, if people don't know what that is. But even parents have high ACEs scores. This is getting out of hand.
Well, it's trauma, it's abandonment, it is all of those things. I mean, imagine living in a two-parent household, even in the event that it's toxic or not healthy. We know now, at least most studies, my understanding is that removing the children can cause PTSD or CPTSD.
Mhm.
But the fact that, you may have two parents or someone moves out or you're supposed to see mom tomorrow, and then all of a sudden you don't know when you're going to see mom again,
Mhm.
and there is literally no contact. And I think people don't understand that you can lose contact with your children without a criminal charge and without a CPS allegation.
Mhm.
And that is so fundamental to understanding the power that family court has, right?
Right.
Because to me, you shouldn't lose all contact with your kids without one of those two things. And one of those two things can still be used maliciously and cannot be accurate.
Mhm.
But, imagine just a judge with no oversight, no checks and balances, i.e., a jury trial, and you could just lose like that.
Oh, right. Especially well, I asked to recuse the judge and he retaliated. He really came back at full force, yelling at me about why I wrote a letter to the AOPC wanting him recused because he was friends with the, opposing attorney.
We all say, it's unrealistic. Like, not we, I'm saying the powers that be say, well, it's unrealistic that a judge is going to quote unquote retaliate against you. And
Uh-huh.
that's just not true. It's
Right.
not true. I mean, I have seen attorneys be retaliated against for being adversarial, especially in the family court system. In the criminal system, it's almost like respected in a way, like some attorneys that are just so litigious, but they're so strategic, they're so smart. True good criminal judges love it, right? They love the law. And I love the law. As lawyers, we're supposed to love and respect the law, make our legal arguments. But in family court, one, a lot of judges have a fundamental misunderstanding of what the law even is. But there's just a frustration if you are litigious in a way that is with legal backing. I mean, I have heard stories where one judge here said, I don't want to see the cases. I don't want to see the case law. I don't care. And, this is allegedly, but that is truly insane. You're not going to hear that in criminal court, at least to my knowledge. And I'm not saying criminal judges are perfect, because they have issues, but no one is even, to be clear, I'm not seeking perfection by any means. I understand that we live in a democracy, like Winston Churchill said, it's the worst form of government other than all other forms. But family court is routinely getting it wrong on a scale that is astronomical, in my opinion. We go back to just me as a litigator. And certainly I would represent people that, it's unrealistic to think you're going to win everything, right? Now I tell my clients, this is what I think the judge is going to do. Listen to me or don't, but it's unrealistic that you're going to win all of the time. And there would be times that I would win when, legally speaking, I don't necessarily think I should have, or that I would lose and I would think, oh my goodness, this is not a just decision, right? But I'm not the decider. I'm an attorney. I've said this before. I think I said this last time on your podcast. If you can do anything and everything you can do to not let a judge make a decision about your family, and I mean that with all sincerity. The problem is high conflict people, coercive control people, that it is a playground. Family court is a playground for abusive litigants. They love it.
Yeah, I agree. And they're mollycoddled by the judge, these abusers.
In some circumstances, yes. I mean, if you look at like family court, like a playground, like a custodial evaluation is the swing set, a GAL is the little thing that, the seesaw. I can't think of the thing that goes round and round, but that is another therapist. And all of these things cost money to play, but they're used as tools to literally emotionally destroy the other party. And you talked at the beginning, like, let's look at examples of where family court has literally destroyed people's mental health and psyche. And Britney Spears is a perfect example. I mean, she was in family court under a conservatorship for years. She was literally paying everyone else's attorney. She was unaware that she was allowed to get her own attorney. And we see, I don't think she'll ever be the same, but under that level of control that'll break a person, beyond break a person. The case of Maya is the most, we're getting into a weird argument where we talk about the most horrific thing a family court has ever done. But the case of Maya is pretty damn bad. If you haven't watched, for everyone listening, if you have not watched the Netflix The Case of Maya, you need to do that immediately, because then you can see how powerful family court is. I mean, CPS get involved immediately. They had a worker that was advocating for mom to not have any contact with that child. And for people that listening, she had a rare disorder. I can't recall what it was, but she had a very rare disorder that she needed ketamine treatments for. And she was in severe pain. They took her to an ER. The ER says Munchausen. But one of the caregivers that was advocating for mom to not have any contact had previous abuse of a child charges. How is this real life? And then, unfortunately, the mom committed suicide after many months. Imagine again. So your child has this very, very serious, I think it was chronic pain syndrome or something along those lines. Your child is sitting in the hospital. You can have zero contact with her. They aren't treating her appropriately. So she is screaming in pain constantly, your own child. If that doesn't make a person crazy or mentally unwell, then is that person even a human being?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
it would do that to anyone. And I think the saddest part, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but the saddest part is when she's in family court and she just asked the judge, "Can I please hug my daughter?" And the judge is like, "No." And we all know the outcome of that. Multi-million dollar, hundreds of million dollar jury verdict, which goes back to our argument that a jury is a check and balance. Everything that could go wrong in that case did, and that happens all too often in family court.
Mhm, mhm. And to do that to someone, to not allow them to hug their child with all these people around, seriously,
Right.
that judge is an alienator. He's an abuser. He's a child psychological abuser, along with these other ones, these third-party parasites of guardian ad litems and FOCs and attorney for children. They have got to go.
There is, I will say, the bench or the judges in particular, they genuinely believe these court appointed workers or these social workers, they blindly believe them, right? And so the case of Maya is one. Well, clearly, whatever the woman's name was, wouldn't recommend removal if the child didn't need to be removed. And clearly, the child didn't need to be removed. In hindsight, we all know that. But the problem I have with family court is, do the judges watch these documentaries and think, oh my goodness, this could be happening in my courtroom? I could have a social worker
Mhm.
that has a previous child abuse charge, or that is not advocating for the best interest, or that is claiming that this child is in danger when the child isn't? Like, is there any critical thinking happening from the bench in family court? And quite frankly, I don't think so. You're shaking your
Mm-mm.
head. I don't think so.
No.
I, I once saw a judge, there was a question about a custodial evaluator, and I think it was a dad. He filed a motion to have her removed because of some comments that had been made allegedly on social media. And the judge's first reaction was, "You are coming in here and maligning this good woman's name." Well, people are people. What if this person did make social media posts that would lead to bias? The judge needs to look at it first before making a decision. And again, just to be very clear, the judge could say, "I'll take your motion under submission. We'll have a short hearing on it." The judge could look at it all and say, "I don't think this is appropriate, and I think this is maligning her character," in an order. But just her first gut punch reaction was, "How dare you try to malign the character of a custodial evaluator?" And I've personally used this custodial evaluator, and it was one of the most horrific reports that I have ever seen. And I will at some point talk about it, but I'm not quite there yet. But long
Okay.
story short, you couldn't, if I found out that one of my friends were going through a divorce with children and this person had been used as a custodial evaluator, I mean, I would probably immediately start crying. I would be so worried about these children, which that is a horrifying response, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I just think they all should go. These guardian ad litems, we don't need them.
So I've seen good guardian ad litems, but I am getting on the train of, well, one, in family court, we got way too many chefs in the kitchen, right?
Right, right.
It's out of control. All these court appointed experts with immunity and or quasi judicial immunity that are all supposed to be making decisions. It's like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is
Right.
doing. Um, but I'm almost on that train. Now, I do think there are circumstances, and I've seen circumstances where I do think they're important. For example, like in Kentucky, let's look at a place where I really think guardian ad litems are very, very important. Essentially, when you want to seek guardianship, which is kind of like California's conservatorship,
Mhm.
the person is appointed a guardian ad litem. Now, in Kentucky, which is very interesting, you cannot get a guardianship without a jury trial, which is
Mm.
how it should be. So Britney Spears could not have been put under a conservatorship or our equivalent in Kentucky without six jury deciding that she needed to be in one. So I certainly think, as far as a GAL being appointed for a person when someone else is seeking guardianship over them, I
Mhm.
think that is very important, and I think it's shown to be effective. But it also could be because we have that check and balance of the jury trial that will hold everyone to account.
Mhm.
Um, I do think the notion that we believe people that went to law school can make decisions about what is quote unquote in the best interest of a child after a 1-day training, certainly it feels problematic, especially when we bill at a rate, an hourly rate. I just saw yesterday Susan Bassey's article, and she released a bill of a GAL. I think they call them minors counsel, but the bill. So for people that don't understand, when you hire an attorney at an hourly rate, typically we bill in 6-minute increments. We bill anywhere in Kentucky from 200 to 350 for divorces for the most part. So if you look at the bill that she posted, and if you're not following Susan Bassey with Davis Vanguard, please do so. But your child's attorney is billing for reading emails from the parent's attorney. So it may be like a 0.2 for reading those emails and a 0.5 for reviewing text message communication between the parents. A lot of the money spent is not going out to meet with the children or going to the schools to talk to the children. I mean, quite frankly, I don't think GALs meet with the child or children nearly at the level that they should. I've heard stories where the GALs have never met the child or children, which how in the hell can you say what's in the child or children's best interest if you haven't met your damn client?
Right. Or even the parent hasn't even met with anybody.
So again, another thing about that is if you're going to meet with the child at mom's house, you absolutely need to meet with the child at dad's house. Because you can just, as adults, you can just see. I mean, we have eyes. If the child acts a different kind of way, you can see. I know one GAL in a case here that has not met with, it's been going on protracted litigation for years. And the GAL, to my knowledge, has still not met with dad at dad's house, which is just wild because the children are smart, right? They will pick up. And especially if they're in a control type situation, they will behave a certain sort of way with one parent or the other, which is typically evident to adults.
Definitely. And I think that's also called splitting. It's a part of a splitting pattern with a child, because they'll say whatever they have to to please that parent, and it could be a lie. And then they go with that other parent and they are telling a lie to that parent. This creates a personality disorder. And these parents that are personality disorders don't know they're manufacturing and creating more personality disorders.
Certainly, I have massive concern for what these children are going to be like, who they are going to become in 10 or 15 years. We have that whole the children are coming movement where they can talk about what the effects of their parents' divorce were, and the fact that these children have an understanding of the legal system or even have had their own attorney at the age of 5, 6, 7. It's kind of a radical notion, but I do think that we are creating a generation of people that, one, believe that they may have a say-so in things that they should never have a say-so in. And what I mean by that is we don't let kids, get tattoos or vote or drink. Why are we letting them make decisions taking so much weight on where they want to live? But there's also the flip side of that, where some GALs or FOCs just literally don't listen to any of it. And that's what I mean by we're getting it wrong more often than we're getting it right. I'm very concerned about the mental health of children that have gone through a divorce, the mental health of children that have been that feel that they have been abandoned by a parent when in actuality they have been alienated or separated from the parent by the court system.
Right. And these judges participate in that by writing these no contact orders. And then the opposing attorney pops up and says, well, I can write that order for you, judge. And the judge will sign off on it. That's even crazier.
That's a common occurrence now. I mean, when I first started practicing, it would be very rare. And I know what you're talking about. So typically the winning party, the person that wins whatever motion they have before the court, will submit a proposed order. But all too often, I do think the judge is just blindly signing some order. So like, even if both sides submit a proposed order or findings of fact, the judge signs one or the other. They're not typically crafting their own. And then the odds of one person being 100% right and the other person being 100% wrong, are low. I would love to see going back to having judges right to getting rid of proposed orders altogether. I don't foresee that. I think judges love it. I think we've got a judge right now on the bench that just literally, I think that orders get stamped and just get processed through. And it's like, I don't even know that this person is reading the orders before. It's just like, which attorney filed the order? Okay, sign it. And again, this is alleged, but it's very concerning to me.
Right, right. And we were talking earlier about that guardian ad litem that got the 200,000 and a trip to Hawaii. So
Yes, and this is the follow-up. There is some great journalism coming out of Colorado on that case where, short version, dad made an allegation against mom's new fiance of sexual abuse of one of the boys, and she ended up losing all three of her children in family court. There was custodial evaluations, GAL. So she sued him in civil court for defamation, won $21+ million. But during discovery for that civil lawsuit, come to find out, the GAL for the children had made over $200,000, and he had taken his wife on a trip to Hawaii because he needed to, quote unquote, meet the children to talk to them. But allegedly, there was a text message between the GAL and dad, who was found to have defamed the fiance, talking about borrowing snorkeling equipment. I mean, the notion that any attorney that's appointed by the court is going to make six figures on a case, that in and of itself should be horrifying. Just at a minimum, And again, this goes back to, and I know I've said this 100 times, but people vehemently believe this cannot happen to them. And I am telling you, without question, it absolutely can happen to you. You have more likelihood of ending up in family court than you do criminal court. People are wrongfully accused, absolutely. But family court touches so many people. If you ever get a divorce, if you ever have a child and have any sort of disagreement, if you ever end up taking in a child from a family member because the family member has issues, you're going to touch family court. And it is truly shocking the power that they have in some of the decisions that they make. And one of the reasons I started this, obviously, we know the TikTok judge and the selfie recording sent me over the edge. But I could not go anywhere in the community of Louisville without hearing a horror story of what was happening in family court. And I am talking people of all jobs, all genders, all races, all ethnicities. It was if I'm sitting at a bar having a cocktail, the waitress is picking up, bartender's picking up a second shift, telling me her horror stories. When you go to someone in the medical profession, when you go to someone in real estate, it is happening it can happen to everyone. And it can cost you what you would pay for a home. It's your children or child's entire education fund. Literally, imagine let's just say 200,000 is astronomical, but let's just say you end up having a GAL or an FOC, 2 kids, and you end up spending 20 or 25,000 on just the GAL or FOC fee. Imagine putting $10,000 in a 529 account for education. It's just big picture. Susan Bassey's very, intense when it comes to this, but she talks about how that some of these, as you call them, I can't even say it. You say third party what?
Third party parasites.
That they are literally robbing children of their future, of their inheritance, and I think there is an argument for that on some cases. I don't want to make blanket statements because as lawyers, I don't think that's appropriate. And again, I know there are some GALs out there that really care. And there are a lot of attorneys out there that see the system going down, but it's just, when you're in it, it's really hard to see all the moving pieces, right? Like I'm lucky to have the bird's eye view. I've been out of it for 2 years.
Yeah, I can't imagine, even with the Catherine Kasanoff case, she was a federal attorney. And if she couldn't stop the mess, who can?
Absolutely. Her case is so tragic. I have not done any TikToks on it because I need to get a firmer grasp on everything that happened. There is a journalist that did a really good job. It's Mrs. or something, MRS, I think is the name of her magazine.
Mhm.
But her case is another example of one, abuse, two, the fact there are too many chefs in the kitchen. It's my understanding that in her case, there were abuse allegations, and the CPS or the equivalent of the CPS told her, don't let dad around these kids. Well,
Mhm.
then you get a family court getting involved, and it's like, oh, you're withholding these children. So then you have the famous custody flip. And then it just went on and on and on from there. But again, this is a parent who believes that their children are in danger, that they have a government agency saying, don't let your kids around this person. And then you have a family court judge, and I believe he was an attorney as well,
Mhm.
um, involved, saying, okay, now dad gets custody. And people don't have a understanding or a grasp on true abuse, in the sense they will do anything and everything to control the other person,
Mhm.
especially when you talk about someone that is, sociopath or, psychopath. And I'm not saying that I'm not making any I'm not making any, medical determination about this guy, but certainly some of the things, some of the videos are extremely problematic, of him screaming at his wife. I believe his wife had cancer at the
Yes.
time. I mean, it's just truly, truly tragic.
Another disturbing photo that was texted to her, that was posted on social media, was that he put her dog down, and then he sends her a picture of him posing with the dog that's dead. And I'm like, "Oh my god, is this what I'm looking at?" You know,
Yes,
how can you do that? That's the kid's dog too.
that is pure evil on so many levels. I can't, it's disgusting. And quite frankly, when a judge sees that,
Ugh.
I don't know how they could ever say, let's just say hypothetically, argument side, that the dog did need to be put down.
Mhm.
Taking a picture of it and sending it, I mean, that's a level of morose and evil and control that it's hard to even articulate. And then you have to think about the fact that she's dealt with this man in a private setting. If he's doing that publicly, what is he doing in private? Which
Right,
in and of itself is just such a, messes with your mind on such an insane level.
and I think she was also asking to see the dog before he would be put down.
And
That's
it's my understanding that law firm that he worked for has subsequently fired him, which, in my opinion, way too little, way too late.
Oh, yeah, day late, dollar short.
Yes, yes. But that is what people that are truly abusive do. And people also don't understand that abusive people are very charismatic. They're very likable. And that goes back to this attorney that said she never represented an abusive person. Abusive people, scary people, don't just walk into your office and say, hi, my name is Christine. I'm an abuser. I did this, I did that. That's not how it works. I mean, they come off as some of the most likable people. And we know that. We have a more of an understanding of narcissistic personality disorder, and the fact that, there are a lot of people high positions of power, preachers, that are doing good things, quote unquote good things in the community, that behind closed doors are just monsters.
Mhm, mhm. Right,
You know,
and oh, go ahead.
So the person on the receiving end of that, that's gaslighting in such a level that they often come across as crazy. And I think that there is something to be said about the fact that family court may be in and of itself gaslighting some of these parents. I mean, making them question their own reality,
Mhm.
and the reality of what's actually happening.
Oh, yeah, definitely, especially when you have dramatic attorneys that are feeding into, especially when they're perpetual liars themselves, but they're also feeding into, someone with a bruised ego that wants to just even destroy the other parent, not only for the child support, but just to destroy them, to make them lose, cost them their job, everything.
I'm so glad you said that. That's another fundamental difference of family court attorneys and criminal attorneys, in the sense, I have seen oftentimes that family court attorneys are often almost quote unquote testifying, right? So
Yeah.
they're sitting here like regurgitating all the facts as though they were sitting in the living room having coffee with the couple the morning the incident happened, which as attorneys, we are not allowed to make ourselves participants in a legal proceeding over which we are the attorneys of record.
Right.
In criminal court, you don't see that. Now, obviously, there needs to be some level of facts. Like you can say, Judge, this is what you're going to hear. This is our case, just for the purpose of expediting the process or just so everybody can have an understanding. But to say that something occurred that you did not witness with 100% certainty is inappropriate. That doesn't happen in criminal court to the level that it happens in family court. I also hear in family court, a lot of attorneys will say we. And so it'll be like, if I'm sitting here with my client, it'll be like, Your Honor, we did what the court said. And it's like, that's not really appropriate, right? Because we're not a we. It's, Your Honor, my client did what the court asked. Your Honor, Mr. So-and-so did, you know what I mean? Or opposing party did not. I would never say that the other attorney did something.
Exactly. That's where I think a lot of collusion is happening. I think when they're starting, this is my opinion, when they start referring to we, they all know each other.
Attorneys, a lot of attorneys do know each other. I think there is a small circle of people that probably have nefarious intentions in the sense to make more money and do all that. But most attorneys that I know aren't in court with the level of frequency as some of these, what I would consider to be nefarious players are.
Yeah.
So if you're handling a caseload and you have, let's just say you have like 10 divorces, you may have one of those that's going to be high conflict, but 9 cases of yours, if you're a family law attorney, and this is pre-pandemic, it's gotten worse, but most of those cases will literally never see a courtroom. And that's how it should be. Because I should be able to advise my client what the law is, the other side, we go to mediation or we work it out amongst ourselves. I heard a statistic today. Now, granted, this was from the TikTok judge, so I don't know. I'll take that with a grain of salt. But she actually taught a CLE, which in and of itself is wowza, is all I'll say.
Yeah.
But she said that 40% of people are pro se now in family court.
See, I heard it's more. I thought it was 70.
Wow. I can't imagine.
I think.
Yes. I mean, that is an astronomical number. And the fact that if you have 2 pro se litigants and some of these judges, I mean, I can't imagine some of the rulings that are coming out. And again, that goes back to the fact that a lot of attorneys that are in the process, we don't see that if they're pro se. How would we? And certainly, as I've been doing this and talking about all this stuff on TikTok, I am getting people that are reaching out to me and I'm seeing orders where I'm just like, oh my word, never in a million years is this based in the law.
It's absolutely the wild, wild west.
It is. It is. And that goes back to your point. I do think that we either have to abolish family court and go back to it being handled as it was before, where it was handled by either in Kentucky, district and circuit court have what we call concurrent jurisdiction over family law matters. It depends on if it's a dependency, neglect, or an abuse, a paternity action, or a circuit court divorce or custody action. But I think that it was handled where I used to practice in Eastern Kentucky, which had a plethora of issues. Okay. I mean, we're talking Eastern Kentucky at the height / a little past the height of the opioid epidemic. Those judges were handling family court matters significantly better than these Louisville family court judges are handling them.
In Mr. Henry's case, apparently he still hasn't seen his child since June 9th. What is up with that?
Quite frankly, I think it's longer. So Mr. Henry is the case. I represented him briefly prior to closing my practice. The mother of his child's convicted felon boyfriend shot the child in the hand, and then mom neglected medical treatment for a significant period of time, was criminally charged, ended up getting a diversion for intimidating a witness in a legal proceeding and tampering with evidence. And the victim in that case was actually the child. He had the child for many years. She was doing well. There was a change, and this is where it really gets, I guess, just sad, but there's an allegation that the child either ran with mom or that mom coerced the child into going with her. But yes, he has not seen his child, to my understanding, in months, and he's been filing numerous motions. Again, it's my understanding he had a GAL. That GAL has withdrawn, and now the court has appointed a new GAL.
Yeah, I'm going to follow his case. It's just unbelievable. Yeah.
It's truly unbelievable, and his name on TikTok is Rick Henry. I would ask everyone to follow him.
Mhm.
His case is the perfect example of how wrong it can go. His case is also the perfect example. So I think he's had 3 judges. His first judge is a retired judge, Judge Paula Sherlock. He posted a video where you watch the hearing, and he almost appears, you can tell the court is very much like, you're crazy, you're dramatic, you're all these things.
Mhm.
And if you're watching it for the first time, you're like, maybe he is, you know what I mean? Maybe he's being dramatic. Now, we don't, what's perceived in the courtroom. Then he goes outside the courtroom. They left the mic on, and you can hear her talking about what a hothead he is, the sheriffs, all this. It's a big, big drama. Then you go outside, and the child is clinging to him like, Daddy, oh my gosh. And what we know, this was in 2017 or 18. What we
Mhm.
know now with 100% certainty is that mom's boyfriend ends up shooting the child. But when you watch
Mm.
the court is very much like, this guy's crazy. You know what I mean? She says hothead 10 times. So
Ugh.
please, please, please watch that video. 'Cause not everything that you see in a 10-minute increment or in a 30-minute hearing in court is a true picture of what's happening. He is the perfect case of someone that may act a little bit unhinged because they are terrified that his daughter is in danger.
Mhm.
Turns out he was right.
Mhm.
He was right.
It To kind of piggyback off of that, a lot of parents say to me, "Well, the judge will listen to the kids. The judge will listen to the kid." And it's like, okay, so I have the transcript of what my child wanted, which was the basic 50-50 where we had always done for 8.5 to 9 years, right? And, the child is telling the judge what's happening, how miserable he is, and then my attorney comes out and she said, "They twisted your son's words." They didn't listen to him at all. I just wanna warn parents, these judges are going with their false narrative, and it surrounds the Title IV defunding.
And I really don't think judges in Louisville meet with children anymore now that we have GALs or FOCs. I actually just watched a hearing that was just painful to watch, in the sense that it was just handled so inappropriately, and just like the judge is so frustrated that they're back, and she's like, well, you guys don't agree. And they've been there. You can tell they've been there numerous times. The child has a GAL, and one of the parties is begging, please talk to my child. Please talk to my child. And I want to just say, Judge, talk to the damn kid.
Right,
If
right.
you're frustrated that you've been here 10 times and you think that the parent that, keeps saying the child's in danger is crazy, well, then talk to the child and decide for yourself. I understand that you've appointed a GAL, but there is nothing that prohibits a judge from speaking with a child just because there's a GAL or FOC.
Mhm.
Also, just big picture, imagine I tell you I've created a court system in which a judge actively does not talk to a interested party ever. Like, that's wild, right?
Mhm.
It's wild that a judge is going to make a decision, especially in a high conflict situation, about a child or children, and literally never have met that child or children. Never.
Ugh.
That's wild.
Mhm.
I know I keep saying that, but there's no other way to explain that. If you were creating a perfect system for, families and to be equitable, surely it wouldn't be a system in which no one's ever met the child over which you're making decisions about.
They just I don't know. I'm just so disgusted.
It's tough. And I do think, and we can like wrap up on this, but Susan Bassey's article yesterday about the billing of GALs, she had a really great point. And she was just saying, basically, we aren't at the tipping point. We passed the tipping point a long time ago.
Yesterday. Yep.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. I think there needs to be a massive, massive investigation into family courts throughout the countries. I mean, throughout the country, throughout the states. There are patterns. There are the same things. I thought that I was in a bubble in the sense it was only happening in Louisville. And when I started speaking out about this, it is all over the country and quite frankly, all over the world.
Yeah, it's a global issue, and I cannot wait to have you come back on again.
I love it. And thank you so much. And I love your podcast and your platform, and just keep doing what you're doing. When I first even thought about coming out and talking about the issues in family court, you were one of the first people that I found because you were brave enough to do it. And I just appreciate it so, so much.
Oh, I appreciate you. I do. I listen to all your videos. You're awesome speaking out. People are afraid to speak out, and they shouldn't be. You have your first right amendment. Use it and speak out as long as it's the truth.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's another thing shortly is just, I am only saying things that, one, the judges are posting themselves, or two, that the judges are ordering in court orders. I am not saying anything radical. You know what?
Right.
It's just that people are unaware of what's happening. And I have gained a huge following, and I am so thankful. I am Kentucky Christine on TikTok. It's Miller Time Louisville on Instagram. And please send me your messages. I can't help you on your individual case, but I just appreciate, and I'm really looking for patterns of what happens in family court.
Yes, yes, myself as well. I totally appreciate you. Hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Attorney Christine Miller. And everyone, have a great day.